ANA? What's this national money show? What's this free appraisal involved? And we managed to break into that market in Portland. And I spent 4.5 hours on the radio. But it brought brought in or kept away. We had over 3,300 people come to the show saying, we heard this on NPR radio. So it's finding new avenues to get what we're all about as collectors.
I think I already know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Move on to the next one.
How long do you plan to be a champion for the numismatic hobby?
Well, unless I die right here on the spot, this is my passion. It's been my love. It's been my life. And it's been my pressure release valve from being an administrator for Los Angeles Unified School District. I didn't have this. I didn't have a board to beat up on me, so I felt wanted and welcome. But this is a lifetime hobby. It's fun. I mean, I've got stuff that's wooden nickels. I collect wooden nickels. How much value is there? I'm thinking of, for me, the personal value. That's how I look at value. Some say, "Oh no, I don't want that. I want to have the monetary value." Well, why did you get why do you get into a hobby? Passion, fun, right? Mm-hmm. If you want to get into the investment angle, you better have Bill Gates' bank account or one bigger. Maybe Donald Trump's or something like that. But not sure just want to enjoy and have it. And for me, as long as I'm kicking, and I certainly plan to share the hobby with others.
That's what I thought.
Well, Walt, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Continued success to you. And I want to say that this hobby needs more Walt Ostromeckis. It's a better place when people have passion for what they do. And with you, it's really very obvious. And we are all grateful for your work. So thank you, and thank you for coming on our show.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Frank Colletti is a certified public accountant with an interest in coin collecting and metal detecting. His coin collection started in 1962 when he received a barber quarter in payment on his paper route. During the subsequent years, with periodic times away from the hobby, his interest in numismatics grew. He has had well over 100 articles published in various metal detecting publications, including monthly columns on coin collecting in Money Talk, and the good deeds that metal detectorists perform in Civil Patrol. He feels metal detectorists may be able to locate scarce and unusual coins and should become knowledgeable about their finds. He encourages them to learn about their finds in the hope that it will kindle an interest in forming a collection as opposed to an accumulation. Frank has won awards for his writing, including Numismatic Literary Guild's Maurice M. Gould Memorial Award for his bi-monthly column in Lost Treasure magazine, as well as the NLG's 1999 Extraordinary Merit for a guidebook of the official Red Book of United States coins. Please welcome to the Coin Show, Mr. Frank Colletti.
I didn't even recognize my description. It sounded nice.
And so Frank, when did you realize that people had started collecting the Red Book?
It was one of those things. I just stumbled across a few copies, started accumulating them, and then looked online because I knew that there were a lot of editions that I didn't own, and just started putting together a set and realized that there was absolutely no information available about it. So I just kept continuing. I found there was one small source that was done in, if I remember correctly, Michigan, by a gentleman who had intended to write a book about it, never got very far, and nobody really knew much about it at all. Finally, I contacted Ken Bressett, and that's somebody who's lost.
And then the aliens invaded.
And continued from there.
That's live radio, folks.
And through corresponding and talking to Ken on the phone and by emails, it just took on a life of its own. The first one that I really bought was at the 2002 ANA in New York City, when I suddenly discovered this strange thing called a special edition Red Book from one of the Red Book dealers there. I'd never heard of anything like that. And Found it fascinating. Sat there for probably 2 hours discussing the different books with him. And I think it was Orville Grady, if I remember correctly. And just after that, put it to the side. And a couple of years later, found another one. And suddenly found it took over half my basement, my living room.
Been there.
My wife would say, I'd be downstairs, and she'd say, "You got another delivery." And I'd walk upstairs, and there would be like 5 cases of books delivered. I'd buy collections all over the country.
I'm sure your FedEx guy loved you.
No, the UPS guy hated me.
Yeah, I bet.
Now, I found myself falling into this in 1987 with Silver American Eagles. I knew that they weren't made as coins per se, but I found myself wanting a complete set by date. Do you think that it's just human nature that we see something that's released annually and just start to put together sets?
I definitely think that. It's like anything else, Indian Head Cents, Barbara Dime's Quarters, whatever. It's just you have to have a complete work towards completion. And there's nothing, the big advantage to the Red Book is that it'll never be completed because it's ongoing, there's always new editions. And there's always something new to discover out there.
Is there an era of Red Books that you actually find yourself favoring more than others?
An era. Yes, the early ones.
You like the early ones better than the...
Definitely. You get into something like a nice first edition, first printing, first edition, second printing, and you go for the quality, you go for a full red, full gilt. They're extraordinarily difficult to find. People bought them then to use them.
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm. And you can find copies inexpensive that are beat because they use them as put their coffee mug on. You find nice stains on them. But to find ones that are still in close to new condition, which new I've never seen, and nobody's ever seen a first and new that I've known of in the last 10, 15 years. But to find one close to new is a search.
What do you think is the best improvement that Whitman has made to the guidebook to date?
Great question. If you go downstairs to the Whitman exhibit and you have a very, very strong right arm, they have a new book, Red Book edition out, which weighs in at about 8 pounds, I understand. And
it's like a baby.
It has a section, say, on large sense that I understand is over 200 pages.
Yes, it's
very
good.
useful. Yes, we use it a lot.
It was one of the most amazing references I've ever seen. I asked Ken about it the other day, and he just looked at me and wiped his brow. It was like exhausting for them to put this together. It was a major, major undertaking.
Do you consider special covers and editions to be part of forming a set?
Personally, yes. I have what I consider probably 5 or 6 different collections of Red Books. The first one is your normal Red Book collection from 1947, including the printings to date. Then I have a set from 47 to 1988, missing 1989, signed by Yeoman. Then I have a set signed by Bressett from the first edition he worked on to date. And then you have presentation editions, which is a special insert in the front page that's signed by Ken, given to anybody who's a contributor. That started, I think it was 1983. And then you have various other types with the special editions, which the first one was 1987 for the ANA's anniversary, which is extremely scarce, even though quite a few were made. There are about 250 made, but far fewer exist because being the first, most people just took it home and use it as a reference. So to find a really nice copy of that is extremely difficult.
I found that one of my favorite sections of the book was the section on the errors, the misprints.
That was great.
I collect the error coins for fun, so that was...
The inverted bindings, I've got spirals where they're bound on the wrong side. There's one where the pages inside were flipped over with the cover properly with the spiral on the wrong side. And nobody can figure out how the heck they did it.
Now, if somebody is sitting at home or sitting in the audience and thinks, hey, that's a cool idea, I want to start doing that, what advice would you give them to get started collecting red books?
Just like with coins, the first thing I would say is buy the best that you can afford. Always go for the best. It's not going to harm you in any way. The second thing is decide how you want to proceed. I personally, if I were doing it over again, I would start from the earlier years and work my way forward. If you don't want to spend initially because you're not sure if you really want to complete a set, I would probably start somewhere around the 6th edition and work up. The 1st, 3rd, 5th editions are the most expensive. Even in, just like with coins, you've got a sleeper in that the 9th edition, which was used with a very strange plastic cover, is very rare without chipping on the spine. And it was only used in 1 year because it was a terrible material, and it chipped and it cracked like crazy. And I recently, about 3 years ago, found one in an auction that was absolutely perfect. And even the auction seller had no clue how rare the piece was. Nobody bid against me, and I got it for practically nothing. And it's the only one I've ever seen that's perfect. So even with this, you can find rarities and sleepers, and just take your time and find the best that you can.
Do you have any other writing projects in the hopper?
I have many writing projects in the hopper. Initially, I wanted to do a book on the Barbers, which mysteriously Dave Bowers decided to do it instead, so I guess I got outvoted. I'd like to do one currently on bust halves, as taking the red book section of the bust halves but greatly expanding it and discussing things like the different dye marriages and continuing forward with that. Not as comprehensive as Overton, because that would be a redundancy, but giving people a strong introduction and a way to pick up the better varieties, the more fun pieces, the overdates, and the more collectible pieces to really get started on a set.
Throughout your collecting, do you have a red book that you consider to be like the Holy Grail? Is there one that is valued way beyond any other?
I have, as a matter of fact, I was talking with Ken about it this morning. I have about half a dozen to a dozen pieces that I have the only ones known. I remember when I was first going to write the book, I happened to be on a conference call with Dennis Tucker, who's the publisher of Whitman, and Ken Bressett. And I said, "Oh, your listing in the back of the red book is wrong. You don't have all the editions listed." And they said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, you've got a spiral for, I think it was 1987, but you don't have the softbound copy listed." And he said, "Well, that's because we didn't make it." I said, "Wait a minute." And I ran downstairs, came back up. I said, "Okay, I'm holding it in my hand and I'm staring at it." And they're like, "Well, we didn't make one." I said, "Well, then I guess I can't, I've got nothing in my hand." Ken then did research, and it turned out that they had made 5 copies of this particular binding. He had one, 3 of them were probably thrown out, and I have one. And they're the only, and he got on the phone with me. He says, "It's rarer than the 1804 silver dollar." I said, "Yes, too bad it's not worth as much as the 1804 silver dollar." And then there's the 50th anniversary. Whitman had commissioned a binding company to make demo copies of, they couldn't decide what they were going to do for the 50th anniversary. So there were 4 sample books made with blank bindings, but with all the lettering on the cover and the spine. And there were exactly 4 made, all different, and I have the only 4 in existence.
Now, I know that from going to Central States last year, they had a 75th anniversary edition red book.
Yes.
Do you collect those special show editions as well?
Absolutely.
They're part of the heart and soul.
From 1987 straight through to that one. And I understand there's a vicious rumor going around there's going to be one for the ANA at the end of this year, which will be obtainable through the ANA only for a contribution. And that'll be the only way that you can get it. And I believe those are all going to be signed by Ken.
Ooh, cool.
So that's also a fun thing. So if you find one that's not signed by Ken, that'll be the rarity.
Call Frank. He'll need it.
Well, Frank, I've known you over the years over the internet, And you've always been a great guy there, at least as much as you can. I'm
Please don't insult me.
I'm